I'm a 29-year-old man, and my relationship with my family has been difficult for many years. While we were never openly hostile, there was always a sense of distance between us. Too many unresolved issues, too many times when I felt like a stranger in my own home. Over time, I moved on, built my own life, and stopped expecting much from them. So, when I got an invite to a family gathering, I was completely caught off guard. It wasn't just a casual meetup. The invitation felt strange. A simple email from my parents asking me to join them for a family dinner. It was unexpected, especially since we hadn't communicated much in years. But something inside me wondered if this could be an effort to reconnect. There was no mention of a special occasion, no birthday or anniversary, just a date, time, and a formal banquet hall as the venue. That itself was odd, as our family never held events like this. Most of our gatherings were informal potlucks in someone's backyard or a simple meal at a mid-range restaurant. This looked like an extravagant event. I almost didn't attend, but part of me, the part that still hoped for some kind of connection, thought this could be an olive branch. Maybe they were trying to fix things. Maybe this was their way of making an effort. I arrived at the venue and immediately felt that something was off. The place was far too elaborate, full catering service, professionally arranged decorations, a DJ playing soft music, and a guest list that included not just close family, but also extended family and some family friends, even a few people I barely knew. They all nodded at me like they knew me. My parents greeted me warmly. My mom was smiling too much. My dad gave me a hearty pat on the back, acting as though we were best friends. Meanwhile, my siblings barely looked at me. My younger brother seemed to actively avoid me, and my sister kept glancing at me and whispering to someone at her table. I found my best friend, who was also invited, and he seemed just as confused as I was. "Do you know what's going on?" he asked. I didn't have an answer. Dinner was served and conversations flowed, but something still felt off. The atmosphere in the room was tense, as if everyone was waiting for something to happen. My parents acted almost as if they were following a script when interacting with me. Everything seemed forced. Then my father stood up, holding his wine glass, and tapped it with a spoon. The room fell silent. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice full of fake emotion. "This is an important evening for our family." I glanced at my best friend, who raised an eyebrow. I could feel the tension build. Something big was about to happen. My father continued, "As you all know, family means everything to us, and sometimes difficult decisions must be made for the greater good." A pit formed in my stomach. He sighed and folded his hands. "This isn't working anymore. We've decided as a family that it's best for us to go our separate ways." Silence. It was suffocating. Then came murmurs, people shifting in their seats, exchanging uncertain glances. My best friend stiffened beside me. Some guests exchanged awkward looks. My mind was trying to catch up with what I'd just heard. My mother then spoke, her voice soft and controlled. "This isn't meant to be cruel. It's something we believe is necessary for the well-being of our family." I barely registered the words. Then my sister stood up, unfolded a paper, and began reading from it. A list of supposed offenses. Selfish, ungrateful, prioritizing outsiders over family, creating unnecessary conflict, refusing to contribute when asked, putting personal interests above family needs. Each word hit me like a punch. Some people actually clapped, not many, but enough to make the sound cut through the fog in my head. I scanned the room. Some looked shocked, others smug. Some relieved it wasn't them. My hands clenched into fists. "What the hell is this?" I finally managed to ask. My father remained calm, as if he had been preparing for this moment. "We've arranged everything for a clean break," he said, motioning to my mother, who handed me an envelope. I didn't take it at first. My mind was still trying to process the humiliation, the audacity of what was happening in front of everyone. Eventually, I grabbed the envelope and opened it. Inside was a letter, cold, impersonal. You are no longer welcome at family gatherings. We've removed you from family documents and group communications. We wish you all the best in life. That was it. No explanation, no apology, just a calculated severing. I looked at my parents, my siblings, the relatives who had gone along with this. My mother's face was neutral. My father gave me a nod, as though he had done something noble. My sister wouldn't meet my eyes. I couldn't speak. I threw the envelope on the table and walked out. My best friend followed me, muttering under his breath. As we left the banquet hall, I could hear the murmurs rising behind us, people talking in hushed tones about what had just happened. Some tried to call out to me, but I ignored them. I walked out, my heart pounding in my chest, knowing one thing for sure. This wasn't about me, this was about control. And whatever their real motive was, I would find out. The doors of the banquet hall slammed shut behind me, cutting off the whispers. I didn't stop walking. My best friend kept pace beside me, silent but tense, as the cold night air hit me like a slap. Behind us, I could hear people coming out, some leaving, others just stepping outside to watch. I ignored them. A distant voice called my name, but I didn't turn around. The envelope my parents handed me was still clenched in my fist. I didn't even realize I was holding it until I reached my car. I slammed it against the hood, the loud slap of it hitting the metal before it fell to the ground. My friend picked it up, looked at it briefly, and then put it back on the car. More people began filtering out of the building. Some avoided looking at me. Others whispered to each other, casting furtive glances in my direction. A cousin hesitated near the entrance, phone in hand, before disappearing back inside. My parents didn't come out. Neither did my siblings. I got into my car and drove away. I didn't check my phone until later that night, and when I did, my notifications were flooded. A cousin had recorded the entire event, and the video was already circulating on social media. I opened the link and saw a shaky, poorly lit recording from across the room. My father's voice echoed through the speakers. "We've come to a decision as a family." The entire speech was there, from my sister reading that absurd list to the awkward claps that followed. The video ended just as I stormed out. The comments started rolling in, some from people I knew, extended family, old friends, reacting with shock. Others were strangers. What kind of cult is this? Imagine throwing a whole party just to cut someone off. Insane. Then my phone buzzed again, a message from a different cousin. Dude, I had no idea this was going to happen. This was messed up. More messages followed, some from distant relatives, some from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Most were variations of the same thing. I had no idea. "Are you okay?" What the hell was that? But one stood out. My mom. I hesitated before opening it. The text was brief. "We did this for your own good. The family can finally heal now." I stared at the screen for a long time before putting my phone down. Over the next few weeks, the video gained traction. It started in family circles and then spread after someone anonymously posted about it online. It wasn't viral overnight, but slowly, people began talking. The headline read, "Imagine getting invited to a party just to be disowned." I wasn't tagged, but I didn't need to be. People were already piecing things together. Then at work, my worst fear was confirmed. One of my co-workers leaned over and asked, "Hey, isn't this you?" He showed me the video on his phone. Another co-worker had already pulled it up. Someone across the office laughed awkwardly. A few of them started whispering. I didn't stay long that day. Later that night, I opened the envelope again. Inside was an official-looking document confirming what I had already suspected. They had removed me from their will, uninvited me from future holidays, and stated that I was no longer considered part of the family. It wasn't just words. It was legal, formal. At the bottom, both my parents had signed their names. I checked my messages again. My brother and sister still hadn't responded. I sent them one last message. Is this really how you want this to go? Nothing. The family was split. Some relatives were on my side, messaging me privately to express their disgust at what had happened. Others doubled down, saying I had brought this on myself. One uncle reached out with something unexpected. He told me he had a spare room if I ever wanted to fully cut ties. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. It was the first time in days that something felt real. Then came the final blow. My brother was getting married soon. I hadn't even known he was engaged. A cousin sent me a screenshot of the wedding invite list. My name wasn't on it. That night, I stared at my phone for a long time. I started typing a message to my parents, to my siblings, to everyone. I wanted to say something, to fight back, to ask them what they were thinking, if they even cared. But before I could send it, I deleted it. They had already made up their minds. The silence from my family should have been my answer, but I needed to know why. Why now? Why go to all the trouble of staging an entire event just to cut me off publicly? There had to be more to it. The first clue came in the form of a cryptic message from a second cousin, someone I had only interacted with at family gatherings. "You should look into what changed before the party," they wrote. "There's more to this than they're letting on." I asked what they meant, but they didn't respond. The moment I got home, I started digging. I remembered my parents once mentioning the family estate. Checking public property records confirmed my suspicions. My name had been removed just days before the dinner. It wasn't a coincidence. When I was younger, they'd mentioned a family property, a vacation house, that was meant for me. I hadn't thought about it in years, but I checked anyway. My name wasn't listed. Instead, the house had been quietly transferred to my younger brother a week before the party. It wasn't a coincidence. I kept searching, and as soon as I saw the legal document date, I knew I needed professional help. I reached out to the lawyer who had handled my family's estate planning years ago. He wasn't our family lawyer anymore, but I thought it was worth a shot. He called me back the next day and confirmed what I had already suspected. My parents had changed their estate plan right before the party. Not only had I been removed, but my younger brother and sister had been given larger shares than originally planned. My parents had also added a clause ensuring they would be financially supported for the rest of their lives, a clause that would have required me to support them before the changes were made. In other words, they expected me to pay for their retirement, and when I didn't, they made sure I was out of the picture. It all started making sense. My parents had been laying the groundwork for months. My sister, the one who read off that ridiculous list at the party, had been pushing for this. The lawyer even mentioned that she had been the most persistent in pushing for the changes. She told my parents I was too independent and wasn't contributing to the family. She painted me as the problem, making sure that when they cut me off, it would look justified. They needed me out of the picture so no one would question the will changes. Then a second video surfaced. Someone else at the party had recorded a different angle. This time it showed my father and younger brother laughing just minutes before the announcement. They weren't nervous, they weren't conflicted, they were excited. The person who uploaded it didn't tag me, but people recognized them immediately. The comments flooded in. "They planned this like a damn theater production," one said. "They really threw a disownment party." The fact that they were laughing before the announcement was insane. More messages rolled in, this time from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old acquaintances, former family friends. "I always thought your dad was controlling, but this is a new level. Your sister used to tell people you wouldn't fall in line with the family. I thought she was joking." Even one of my father's longtime friends reached out. "I didn't know they were going to do that to you. If I had known, I wouldn't have gone." By now, I had enough. I sent my father a text. No small talk, no pretense, just one question. Was this all about money? His response came quickly. "It's about what's best for the family." That was all I needed to see. By then, the internet had caught on. People had started digging into my family's history of manipulation. Old stories resurfaced, times when my father had cut off other relatives financially, when my sister had tried to control people through guilt. A thread on Reddit pieced everything together. His family cut him off right after changing their will. The brother got the property that was meant for me. The sister pushed for this for months. The parents were laughing before the announcement. This wasn't a sudden decision. This was a long con. Then came the final warning from the lawyer I had spoken to. "I'm going to be honest with you," he said. "If your parents are willing to cut you off this publicly, they might try to make sure you can't contest the will in the future. They might legally block you from making any claims." My younger brother and sister must have gotten nervous because within an hour they removed me from social media. No explanation, just gone. It was damage control. They didn't want to be associated with me anymore because they knew things were about to get worse. That night, for the first time, the rage hit me. I had let a lot of things slide in my life. I had ignored years of being treated like I wasn't part of the family. But this was deliberate. They had planned this for months. They wanted me gone because I refused to be their financial backup plan. I started considering my options, exposing them publicly, taking legal action, both. I had everything I needed, the evidence, the messages, the videos, the legal changes. I just had to decide if I wanted to use it. I had the receipts. Every piece of evidence showed exactly how my family had planned to cut me off, rewrite the will, and make me look like the villain. For days, I debated what to do with it. I could stay silent and let them get away with it, or I could tell my side of the story. The truth would come out eventually, and when it did, I would make sure they couldn't play the victim anymore. At least, that's what I thought at the time. I decided to share my version of events by composing a detailed Reddit post outlining the sequence of events. The invitation, the orchestrated humiliation, the changes to the will, the second video showing my dad and brother laughing, and the messages from my sister admitting I was excluded because I was too self-sufficient. I included screenshots obscuring names for privacy while leaving enough details to prove I wasn't lying. After posting, I went to sleep, assuming maybe a couple of hundred people would see it. When I woke up, the post had gone viral. Thousands of upvotes, hundreds of awards, and an overwhelming flood of comments came in faster than I could process. This situation was prime material for a villain origin story. They literally threw a celebration to cut me off. I'm still stunned by that. Your family is like a business. If you're no longer useful, you're discarded. People weren't just reacting. They were investigating. Reddit users started piecing together timelines, cross-checking legal details, and pointing out the absurdity of what had occurred. Some even created TikToks to break it all down. Then my siblings saw it. My brother blocked me on everything. He had already been avoiding me, but this made it official. My sister did the same, but not before posting something vague on Facebook about how some people had no shame airing family drama online and how true families knew the truth. She deleted it within an hour when the comment section tore her apart. Then I received another message. Aunt, who had kept quiet up until then, sent me a long text confirming that the inheritance changes had been planned for months. She had overheard my sister convincing my parents that I didn't deserve anything because I wasn't part of the family anymore. Although she didn't agree with what had happened, she didn't want to get involved. Meanwhile, my parents went into full damage control mode. First, my dad tried calling. When I didn't answer, he left a voicemail. His tone was controlled, almost scripted. He didn't deny what I posted, but claimed I was misunderstanding things and should have spoken to him privately. A few minutes later, an email arrived. A long message accusing me of being irrational and disrespectful to my family and claiming that he never wanted things to end up like this. But I had forced his hand by making everything public. I didn't respond. Then more secrets came out. Another relative casually mentioned, "Oh, I thought you already knew your childhood home was sold months ago." I had no idea. I thought my parents still owned it, but they had sold it without telling me. Another financial move they didn't want me questioning. It was becoming clearer that they had been planning for a while to erase me from their lives. I later found out my sister had been discussing my exclusion with other relatives for weeks. One cousin forwarded me a message in which she justified it, saying, "It's not personal, but it was the only way to keep things fair. He wouldn't let us control him, so this was the only way to handle it." I immediately screenshotted it. My sister went into panic mode, calling people and trying to spin a new narrative, but the damage was done. The internet did its thing. TikTok and Twitter picked up the story, with people making reaction videos, analyzing the situation, and debating whether my family was a cult or just money-hungry. Even those who didn't believe the full story couldn't ignore the viral videos, the clips from the party, the awkward clapping, and the second video of my father laughing. It was too real to be faked. Then came the workplace fallout. Someone at my job brought up the story in the break room. The conversation was loud enough that I couldn't ignore it. "Oh my God, I saw that on Reddit." "Wait, wasn't it you?" They were hushed, but it was too late. The next week I could feel the side glances, the awkward pauses when I entered the room. It wasn't judgmental, just curiosity. Strangely, most people supported me. A coworker even admitted to having a family just like mine. It was weird having my personal life become public knowledge at work. Then another message came in. An old neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years reached out. They told me that my father had done this before, cutting off another family member financially after they questioned his decisions, erasing them from the family just like he had with me. At that point, I knew what I had to do. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer. I wasn't sure if I could challenge the will, but I needed to know my rights. Then my father finally snapped. A final text came, short and cold. "You've ruined this family's reputation. I hope you regret this." Minutes later, my mother sent a long message, guilt-tripping me, saying how she never wanted things to go this way and how I was tearing the family apart. Neither of them denied the financial moves nor apologized. They just wanted me to be quiet. I didn't reply. For the first time, I knew I didn't owe them anything, and I was ready to fight back. I sat across from the lawyer, reviewing everything. Challenging the will wouldn't be easy, he explained, but there were loopholes. If I could prove that the changes had been made under fraudulent circumstances, like coercion or undue influence, I had a case. The fact that my parents had rewritten everything a week before cutting me off publicly was suspicious. Then a bombshell came. A cousin, one of the few family members still in contact with me, sent me a message. "Your brother and sister knew about the will changes for months. Your dad promised them extra money if they agreed not to challenge him." My siblings weren't just bystanders. They had actively agreed to let me be erased in exchange for a bigger share. Meanwhile, social media was still tearing my family apart. My sister, clearly frustrated, made a vague post about entitled people thinking they deserved handouts. It backfired instantly. People recognized her from the viral posts, and the comments called her out. "Oh, like how you helped steal your brother's inheritance. You literally threw a party to cut him off. Sit this one out. Didn't your texts already expose you?" She deleted the post within an hour. Then another piece of evidence landed in my lap. Another cousin messaged me a screenshot from my father, one he had sent before the will changes. It was a direct admission that they were rewriting everything, not because of anything I did, but out of spite. If he won't support this family, then he doesn't deserve to be part of it. That was the proof I needed. This wasn't about my behavior. It was about control. The next day, things escalated in an unexpected way. My father called my workplace. He tried to spin a new narrative, claiming I was mentally unstable, that I had a history of erratic behavior, and they should be concerned about my actions. Luckily, my boss wasn't fooled. He pulled me aside, told me exactly what had been said, and reassured me that my job was safe. But now it was personal. My parents weren't just trying to cut me off. They were trying to destroy my life. Meanwhile, the extended family was falling apart. A huge argument erupted in the family group chat. Some relatives were furious with my parents for what they had done, while others sided with them. Those against them were starting to realize the full scope of what had happened. Wait, so you changed the will and then cut him off publicly to cover your tracks? How do you disown your own child and still try to control their life? That's insane. I had no idea it was this bad. Others doubled down, claiming I embarrassed the family, that I got what I deserved, and that I should have been grateful. Now look at me, crying online for attention. The chat descended into chaos, and by the end, half the family had left the group entirely. Then a journalist reached out. The story had gained so much traction that a local news site was interested in doing a piece on toxic family dynamics and financial manipulation. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go that far, but the fact that it had reached media attention meant my parents were feeling the pressure. Sure enough, they tried to fix it the only way they knew: money. My father messaged me. "We're willing to discuss a small settlement if you agree to take everything down and stop talking about it." A bribe. My lawyer responded, "That means they know they're on shaky legal ground. They wouldn't offer anything if they weren't worried." Then the ultimatum came. A final message from my father. "If you remove all posts and publicly apologize to the family, we will consider giving you something." They didn't want to make things right. They wanted me to admit fault publicly so they could regain control of the narrative. I didn't hesitate. I leaked the message online. The backlash was immediate. Even relatives who had been neutral started distancing themselves from my parents. Wait, so they're only offering money if you apologize? This was never about fairness. They just want to shut you up. This is disgusting. Even people who had defended them went silent. Then my sister snapped. She sent one last message, a rant full of insults, calling me pathetic for airing family drama and saying she hoped I never saw a cent of the family money. I saved it, screenshotted it, and documented it. She had just proved she didn't want fairness. She wanted to control everything. I'd seen enough. I called my lawyer and told him to move forward. I wasn't just going to challenge the will. I was going to make sure they never did this to anyone else. The legal wheels started turning. My lawyer sent an official request for all documents related to the will changes. My parents now had to respond. No more ignoring. No more controlling the narrative. Then the cracks started to show. A week after my lawyer sent the request, my father started panicking. Someone in the family let slip that he was furious about the cost of the legal process. He had assumed cutting me off would be simple and clean. He never thought I'd fight back, and he certainly never expected me to get a lawyer. Turns out, even with the will rewritten, they still had to prove in court that everything was done fairly. With all the evidence I had, that was going to be a problem for them. At first, my brother stood by my parents, but as the legal battle dragged on and pressure mounted, his confidence wavered. He reached out to me indirectly, asking if we could fix this before it got worse, but I ignored him. He had already made his choice. Then a message popped up from an unknown number. It was him. He wasn't apologizing, he wasn't admitting guilt, but he was clearly scared. He didn't want to be dragged into a lawsuit and wanted to know if there was a way to settle things quietly. I ignored it. If he was nervous now, it meant things were finally getting real. Not long after, my mother made her move. A handwritten letter arrived at my door. No text, no email, just old-fashioned emotional manipulation. She wrote about how much she missed me, how she never wanted things to turn out this way, and how she just wanted peace in the family. It was carefully worded. She never denied what they had done. She never took responsibility. She just wanted me to drop everything. I didn't respond. If she truly wanted peace, she never would have let things escalate this far. By this point, the family was officially at war. My parents started cutting off any relatives who supported me. They removed people from group chats, refused to answer calls, and made it clear that if you weren't on their side, you weren't part of the family. Some aunts and uncles distanced themselves from the drama, not wanting to pick a side. Others started speaking up. Then something I never expected happened. My father's own brother, my uncle, reached out. He had stayed quiet throughout the whole mess, never getting involved, but now he wanted to help. He had seen this happen before when my father had done something similar to another relative years ago, and he was done staying silent. He told me he was willing to testify. That changed everything. Now it wasn't just my word against my parents. It was their own sibling calling them out. Then the next bombshell dropped. Through some financial digging, my lawyer discovered that my father had already spent part of the inheritance. He had assumed I wouldn't fight back, so he got comfortable. This meant that if I won the case, they would have a significant financial hole to fill. It also meant my brother and sister might not even get the money they were promised. That's when I got the next message from my brother. He was rethinking everything. Around the same time, the journalist covering the story confirmed they were moving forward with the article. The piece wasn't just about my family. It was about inheritance battles, financial manipulation, and controlling family dynamics. But my parents knew exactly who the inspiration was. That's when my father snapped. Another text came through. No more pretending, no more manipulation, just pure rage. You are dead to me. Enjoy being alone forever. It was the final cut. Then he made a mistake. After sending that text, his anger got the best of him. He went into the family group chat and ranted about how I was ruining everything. My sister, who had been working so hard to control the story, was mortified. She immediately left the group chat. I took a screenshot of my father's message and posted it online. No added commentary, no extra words, just his own words exposing exactly who he was. This time, even those who had defended my family went silent. Then the good news came. My lawyer reviewed everything, the will changes, the timing, the manipulation, and now the uncle willing to testify. The case was even stronger than we thought. The will changes were clearly not made in good faith. My father had proven his bad intentions, and now there was a real chance they wouldn't be able to keep everything. My brother, who had ignored me for months and agreed to cut me off, sent another message. This time he wasn't looking for a quiet settlement. He was rethinking his involvement completely. I didn't know it would go this far, he admitted, realizing that siding with my parents might have been a mistake. I hadn't replied yet. He had made his decision, and as the legal fight intensified, my parents' reputation began to suffer. Those who were once close to them started avoiding them, and even family friends kept their distance. They were no longer just losing money. They were losing the social support they'd spent a lifetime cultivating. The image they had worked hard to build was now falling apart. I refused to get sidetracked. Instead of being swept up in their emotional breakdowns and attempts to manipulate, I remained focused. The case was moving forward, and I was prepared to see it through to the end. The case had officially begun, and my lawyer filed the necessary paperwork, compelling my parents to provide full documentation of all financial changes, including the altered will, account transfers, and property shifts. They had no choice but to comply. That's when the real trouble began. A week after the filing, my lawyer began investigating the financial records, and what he uncovered was worse than expected. There were major discrepancies. Large sums of money had been withdrawn before the will was amended, much more than my parents should have had access to. The timeline was damning. My father had moved substantial amounts of money just before officially cutting ties with me. This wasn't just about severing ties with me. He had been funneling money before making it official. If the court discovered fraud, My father could face legal consequences. As soon as my father found out that the financial records were being examined, he started panicking. Suddenly, family members were receiving calls. My parents attempted damage control, making excuses and twisting the narrative to paint me as the problem. But the money trail was undeniable. They had spent years trying to make everything appear fair, but now their whole scheme was falling apart. I had assumed my brother was regretting his involvement. He had previously reached out, worried about being dragged into the case. Then he changed sides and fully aligned with my parents, even calling me a money-hungry traitor in a family chat. He publicly accused me of tearing the family apart over money. However, he forgot one crucial fact. I didn't start this. They threw a party to cut me off, changed the will in secret, and now they were trying to act like I was the villain. His outburst backfired as others in the chat began questioning him. So you're fine with the fact that Dad moved money before the will was changed? If OP was so selfish, why did they have to bribe you to stay quiet? This doesn't make OP look bad. It makes you look guilty. After that, he left the chat. Shortly after, I received a voicemail from my mother. It lasted 10 minutes, with her sobbing uncontrollably, claiming I had ruined the family, that she couldn't believe I would do this, and that I was breaking her heart. But nowhere in her message did she deny their actions or apologize. It was just another attempt to manipulate me. I deleted it. While my brother was falling apart publicly, my sister was exposed privately. A former friend of hers messaged me with some revealing information. She had been spending inheritance money even before the will was finalized, before I was officially cut off. She had made large purchases, sure that I wouldn't fight back, already spending her extra share. Screenshots of messages leaked, where she bragged about getting more money now that I was out of the picture. Once those messages spread, people started turning against her. Even the neutral relatives began seeing how calculated it all was. She stopped posting online entirely. Then, my father made a last-ditch attempt. He sent me a message offering a payout if I agreed to drop the case immediately. For months, they had acted like I was the problem, like I was selfish, and now they were offering me money just to stay silent. I forwarded it to my lawyer, and his response was simple. This only strengthens your case. They know they're losing. My father filed a counter-motion to dismiss the case, arguing that it was baseless and that the will changes were fair. The judge rejected it right away. They had no solid evidence. The legal battle dragged on for months. My lawyer filed paperwork, and my parents' legal team fought back, attempting to delay the process. But eventually, they had to respond. Then another relative stepped up. This wasn't just my uncle. It was someone else who had also been excluded from the will. They had assumed they had no power to fight back, but now that I was challenging it, they were willing to testify. This wasn't just about me anymore. My parents had been manipulating people for years, and now they were losing control. My father had spent years building a reputation, business ties, and social circles. He had always ensured people saw him as a respected man. But now his business partners were pulling away, and the word about the lawsuit, the inheritance fraud, and the fact that he had stolen from his own child was spreading. He wasn't just losing family support, he was losing social credibility. For someone like him, that was worse than money. My brother soon realized the mess he had gotten himself into. Regret set in. He had publicly defended my father, tried to turn everyone against me, and now he wanted to withdraw. But it was too late. He had made his choice. By this point, I had nothing left to lose. I told my lawyer to go after everything, expose the financial fraud, the inheritance theft, and the years of manipulation. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about making sure they never did this to anyone again. The legal case reached a tipping point. My father had done everything in his power to block, delay, and manipulate, but now the judge wasn't having it. In a major court ruling, my father was ordered to release all financial documents related to the inheritance. Every bank transfer, every account change, every suspicious transaction, everything had to be exposed. That's when the real damage began. My lawyer combed through the records, and it didn't take long to uncover a hidden bank account with thousands of dollars, money originally meant for me. It was clear fraud. My father had moved the funds before disowning me, thinking that once I was out of the picture, no one would question it. But now it was all coming to light. Once the information was made public, my brother started to panic. He had spent months defending my parents, calling me a traitor for fighting back. But now he was caught. When confronted about the hidden account, he tried to deny it, but his reaction was too defensive. Then my lawyer found more evidence. My brother had accessed the account and benefited from the stolen money. He was in legal trouble, too. Next, my mother tried to intervene. I received a voicemail, her voice shaky, a mixture of desperation and guilt. She begged me to drop the case, to move on, and let the family heal. She didn't deny what had happened or take responsibility. She just wanted me to let them off the hook. This time, I didn't ignore it. I sent her a short, direct message, telling her I saw through her manipulation, that I would never trust them again, and that my father and she had dug their own graves. There was no going back from this. While my mother begged, my sister lashed out online. She posted a lengthy, rambling rant about how family should always come first, and how some people care too much about money. But the comments weren't on her side. Weren't you caught spending inheritance money before the will was finalized? You threw a party to cut your brother off. Sit this one out. Your own messages exposed you. She deleted the post within hours. While my sister was imploding online, my father's business reputation was crumbling. Word spread, and his partners began distancing themselves. He was losing money fast. Everything he had worked for was unraveling. Some extended family members tried to stay neutral, but the evidence was too much for them to ignore. A few completely cut my parents off, while others said they wanted nothing to do with them. The family name was ruined, all because of greed. Then came another message from my brother, backpedaling hard. I didn't know it would go this far. Maybe we can settle privately. He had spent months mocking me, defending my parents, and now he wanted out. I ignored him. He had made his choice. The final blow came for my sister. A cousin leaked messages showing she had known about the will changes from the start and had been actively involved. She had told my parents I was too independent and wasn't contributing. She had pushed them to cut me out, and now everyone knew. My lawyer presented me with a choice: continue full litigation or negotiate a private settlement. Either way, my parents were going to lose. Then my father made one last effort to regain control. He sent a final message: settle now or you're disowned forever. I laughed when I read it. They had already cut me off, humiliated me, and treated me like I was nothing. Now they were pretending like I had something to lose. I posted one last update online, stating I had no interest in being part of their toxic family ever again. The response was overwhelming. You did the right thing. Your family lost the best thing they had. Finally, at the next hearing, the judge issued a warning. If more fraud was discovered, my father could face criminal charges. His face went pale. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about real legal consequences. The case was nearing its end. My father was cornered, my mother was begging, my sister was hiding, my brother was regretting, and I was ready to finish this. The final hearing arrived, the showdown where everything came to light. The courtroom was silent as my lawyer presented the full scope of the fraud, the hidden account, the misuse of funds, and the manipulation to cut me out. The evidence was undeniable. My father sat stone-faced, my brother looked shaken, my mother stared at the table, and my sister was nowhere to be seen. The judge made the final ruling. My father had acted dishonestly and was ordered to return part of the inheritance to me. I had won, As soon as the ruling was made, my brother broke down in tears, his hands shaking. He realized what he had done. He had chosen the wrong side. He had publicly defended our parents, called me a traitor, and now he had lost everything: his money, his reputation, and his relationship with me. He didn't even attempt to talk to me after the hearing. He just stared ahead like his world had collapsed. The moment the ruling was public, my sister vanished from social media. No more cryptic posts, no more passive-aggressive rants about loyalty. She knew everyone had seen the leaked messages. She had been exposed for pushing my parents to cut me off, for spending money before the will was finalized, and for lying about her involvement. Now she was too embarrassed to show her face. After the ruling, my father gave me one last cold, angry look filled with hatred. He told me I was dead to him and to never contact them again, as if I hadn't already cut them off months ago. Then another bombshell dropped: a tax fraud investigation. It turned out my father's financial records didn't just expose what he did to me, they revealed other shady transactions. The IRS started investigating, and the same man who tried to erase me might lose everything because of his greed. The extended family remained divided. Some cut my parents off completely, seeing the proof and wanting nothing to do with them. Others made excuses, claiming they were just trying to look out for the family, saying it was wrong to take them to court, and that it should have been handled privately. Those people were cut off too. If they were willing to defend such manipulation, they weren't worth keeping in my life. Finally, I felt free, for the first time in months. No more legal battles, no more toxic family drama, no more people trying to control me. I had fought back and won. A month later, I heard through the grapevine that my father had been forced to sell property to cover his legal fees. The same inheritance money he had stolen was gone, and the security he thought he had was disappearing. Everything he had done to secure his future had backfired. Then came one last email from my mother, a long, desperate message begging me to come back to the family, telling me how much she missed me, how she wanted to fix things, and how none of this was her fault. I didn't even read it all. I deleted it. Not long after, my brother reached out. This time it wasn't anger. It was regret. He finally realized what he had lost. He wanted to make things right, but after everything he did, there was no going back. I ignored him. Some things can't be fixed. I took my share of the money and did something for myself. I moved to a new city, got a new apartment, and started a new life. No more family guilt, no more looking over my shoulder, no more living in their shadow. This was my fresh start. I made one final Reddit update, not for pity, but to thank those who had supported me. The response was overwhelming. You did the right thing. Your family lost the best thing they had. Living well is the best revenge. Looking back, I realized something important. My family had spent years controlling and manipulating me, trying to force me into their mold. When I refused to play along, they discarded me. But in doing so, they revealed their true selves, and that was the greatest gift they ever gave me, because now I was finally free.